turn it over to Ron and you can start the work session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. We've actually got two work sessions today before the council. The first is the Trees and Trails Advisory Committee update. Back in 2018, the City Council adopted an ordinance to create a Trees and Trails Advisory Committee to the City Council. We had met regularly up until COVID, and at that point, we kind of canceled meetings for a while. We're back to meeting again, and I don't think that there's ever been a formal presentation done to the City Council. I think there's been some updates. So as the committee talked, we thought it would be a good idea to update the council on things we've been working on, get some input from City Council, and find out if there's some things that you would like to have the committee look into or work on. So with that, I will turn it over to the chair, Rick Barnett, and he can give you the update on the trees and trails.
Right. My name is Rick Barnett. My background is in parks and trees, is how I fit into that committee. I've got two other of the members here. I want them to introduce themselves quickly. I think that the work that we're doing is very important. If you think about parks, you think about paths, you think about trees, you're talking long-term on all of those. You're talking 40 years, 50 years. You want to make choices that are really good. And that's what hopefully we can help you with. So to give you some perspective, 40 years ago, I was still sneaking people in the trunk of my car into the movie theater before they figured out that they just do it all. Some of you were there. You're doing the same thing.
They're looking for you.
Yeah, they're still looking for me. So decisions that were made then we're seeing the benefit of those now. There were Lebanon has made a lot of really good decisions for economic development in some of those areas. So what we're trying to do is help the city make good decisions about parks, about trees, and about trails. We're working on a draft to get to the council at some point soon that adds parks to the responsibility of the committee. Right now, it's trees and trails. And it makes sense to do parks, to have a citizen advisory committee to help with parks as well, because again, it's a long-term thing. You have some development that you need to figure out exactly how that's going to go here pretty soon. And so that's what we're here to do, and to help however we can. So in your packet, there were some, just a basic report for trees and trails, some of the things we've been working on. I'm not going to go into every little piece of it, but we believe that the city would benefit from the expansion to parks as well. And we believe that adding a couple of more people, we have people with great trails experience. We have people with a variety of experiences on there, but adding a couple committee members that have experience particularly in trees or in parks. I swing both ways because I have experience in both. We had asked to again take a look at what we're doing, and are we, is there anything we can do to improve it? For instance, one of the things on here is Dr. Nelson suggested that it's late in the process, but a street project we're working on Airport there. Maybe there's some changes to make that just a little bit safer. Maybe too late in the process, and it's not our job to tell you what to do. It's our job to say, hey, if there's a chance to look at this, look at this. We are in support of, there's a concept of Gill's Landing trail extension. It might work, it might not work. We're in support of going and seeing, is it going to work or is it not going to work? And again, that's a city staff decision at some point. And finally, the last piece of that is we are willing and able to help staff on larger, small projects that benefit the Lebanon community. I've lived here for 40 years, and I love this community. And I come home to this community every day. I go away from it every day, but I come home to it every day. And I'm impressed with the things that have happened here. I'm impressed with where we're at. I'm impressed with how the size of the city makes you work together. You can't be in your little silos. Go, I want to do this project. I want to do this project. I want to do this project. But you have to work together, and that's really a good thing. So that's the end of my report. Unless you have any questions, I'll sneak back to the back.
I had a question, if I can. You were talking about expanding into parks.
Mhm.
What does that look like compared to what we're doing now, how we're currently operating?
Well,
Expanding into parks is kind of it is
Yeah.
on. I'll talk louder for you, Mike.
It's
I mean,
it's an advisory group. They wouldn't be running the parks.
no, well, that's what when you
Right.
say expand into parks, what does that look like?
well,
to you?
I think that you have a grant that you need to figure out, what are we going to do with this? How are we going to make good decisions long term? How do we make, I'm in park maintenance. That's what I do for a living.
Mhm.
How do we do this so that it's not going to cost us a lot of maintenance money over time? So it's making good decisions. It's using the right fixtures. It's using the right procedures. It's using not digging yourself in a hole in a maintenance. It's great to build stuff. I love to
Mhm.
build stuff, but it's harder to maintain stuff. And that's, and we want to be sensitive to that, but we also want to give the council ideas on, here's what we think would be good. Here's, the limitations. Here's the things that, are going to be a maintenance concern. And we won't always know that. Sometimes a lot of times that'll be city staff, but we do have people that have experience in trying to maintain things. So.
Okay.
Just some history too. It used to be the Parks and Trees Committee, and I was on it with Ron way back around 2000 or so. And that was the group that we had originally. And then when Gary was manager, we were consolidating groups and trying to get things organized. And I think Parks just didn't get put in there, and I think they should have been.
Okay.
I think that it just seems like a natural fit, really.
Yeah,
Ron?
they both come from the same general fund source of revenue, right? So they kind of are tied together, and whether you build parks, whether you maintain parks, build trails, maintain trails, most of the grants you go after, not most, but a lot of the grants you go after could be either or, parks and grants. So it makes sense to have a parks presence along with this committee and do it that way. And I think that's where we're coming from, and the committee is in agreement with that. We've still got a few things to work through on the ordinance, and I think we'll work through them at our next committee meeting, and then we'll probably bring back a draft or a final for the council to review and go from there.
Good.
Yeah, I've always felt that the park should be a part of trees and trails. It's just.
Makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense, yeah.
And I'm anxious for that to be presented, and council then can decide
Mhm.
if that's what we want to do.
And thanks for all your guys' work, and thank you, because I haven't met you before, but I appreciate having you with all of your parks experience. I think that'd be perfect on that
That's
committee,
kind of
too.
overrating me. I just try to figure it out. So thanks. And thank you for your
Absolutely.
Christmas light display. We see that every year.
Oh,
So-
thank you. I'm working on it now. So.
Mayor, I do have one more question. During our session, there was a question, and I'd like you to answer it more publicly. And that is, how, in our small town of Lebanon, how do our trails rate amongst the rest of the state? And I loved your answer before, so I'm hoping you can.
Yeah, you got me on a
make it even better.
soapbox on that one. So full disclosure, I'm the maintenance manager for Albany's parks and buildings. So that's what I do career-wise. And we are terribly jealous of Lebanon. Lebanon has done a very good job with their trails in particular. And having an organization like Build Lebanon Trails that is just kind of pushing that forward, not saying this is how we got to go, but here, this is, consider this, and we'll bring the resources and that. And I think that there's, when grant opportunities come along, people look at Lebanon and go, wow, look at what they've got, look at where they're going. Right now, there's an additional grant that the state had some extra money coming, and Lebanon is in a really good position to look at expanding that. I think that's a great vision. I just, like I said, we're jealous, and of a city this size, it's pretty incredible. Unless you're like in a resort community, who else can? I'm in a step challenge right now at work. When I get done here, I'm sneaking out the rest of the day and I need to put 5 miles in, and I'm going to walk down those paths and put 5 miles in, and it's easy, and I'm not going to get ran over. And there's just a lot of good to it. Did that answer it?
Yeah, beautifully. I just thought that we all need to hear that Lebanon really has, and you said that folks across the state feel that way as well.
Yes, the people that I've dealt with, people a dozen miles that way feel that way too. Yeah. So,
All right, well, don't give them our secrets, okay?
thank you.
Thank you.
So one of the things we are looking for from the council is kind of a consensus on some of these items. You can see in here where one of the recommendations from the committee is to extend a multi-use path from 7th Street along Airport Road to, I'll call it the eastern property of the Applegate Landing where a trail is going to go. And that sounds easy. There's right-of-way conflicts. We're going to have to get right-of-way. We would have to pay for the utility relocates because we've already relocated utilities. So these are some of the things that we want council consensus that yes, since the city staff out on that mission, we would report back to you, obviously, what our findings were. Same thing with the Gills Landing. It's just basically a connector trail between the Old Mill Trail and the park. The trail to River Park. Basically make sure that the city council's on board with that. No money's been budgeted for that this year, but we can definitely look into it and move that forward. And then, of course, the moving the Parks Committee forward. So, and then if there's anything else that you would like the committee to work on or have staff bring to you, we're more than willing to do that. So that's kind of what we're looking for, is just a consensus to move that forward. There is no decision to be made because we really don't know what we can and can't do at this point.
I have a question, Ron.
Yes.
As far as the trails / parks, what would you say kind of like the top 3 priorities are the next 5 years?
Well, I think your priority is going to be the Cheetah Lake Park grant and the grant that we have now, which is for the South Shore Trail, whatever form that takes, depending on the property down there. So that's going to be your priority. That's going to take, by the time we do all the improvements to that down there, you're looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of $3 to $4 million project. So it's not going to be just a quick one, right? So there's a lot that's going to go into that. So that's a priority. You know, there's a ton of grant opportunities out there for building new trails and whatnot. You've kind of got to be shovel ready. We've got a few sites. The site on Applegate is a prime example where you could do a trail fairly easy. So those would be the top ones. You know, we're working through other properties to build future trails. You know, I would caution that we don't want to get too far out ahead of ourselves. We've got a huge workload right now, and to add more of that, something's going to have to give somewhere.
Right.
And we're finding it increasingly hard to hire staff. So, you know, we're stuck so far with what we have. So those would be your 3 priorities, I believe, at least from my perspective. I mean, the money's in hand and they're ready to go. So,
They are ready to go.
well, I mean, design-wise.
Oh, yeah.
When I say ready to go, I mean, they got money and
Yeah.
there's no property acquisition that's necessary for those. So those would be the priorities.
Right.
Until something changes and there's a new priority.
Right, right.
I'd like to see the 2 trails looked at and,
Okay.
and just see if, you know, see how feasible they are. But knowing that we've got those other 2 big projects, so it wouldn't necessarily be a big rush to get that done. But I think that's something that we should look at because I'd like to see both the connectors happen.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
So the airport road piece will go, it'll be pretty quick. Well, I say pretty quick, as soon as we can get the project off the ground. We're still waiting on right away. But that one we can look at fairly quickly with that. But with the Cheetah Lake Park grant coming up, we may have to push out a little bit, you know, 4 or 5 months on looking at the Gills Landing stuff. But we can definitely look into it as soon as I can break somebody free to do so.
Also, are you guys in agreement also to look at putting the parks in the committee also?
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Makes sense.
Makes so
Okay.
much sense.
Okay.
On the current projects, Cheetah Lake, timeframe wise, where do you see that
Well, we have a meeting next week to start looking at how we're gonna attack the design.
1 year, 2 year?
Yeah, so that's the thought process, but keep in mind, we've got to work around the Strawberry Festival, so I don't know whether we can get it to a point where you can go next year right after Strawberry Festival and get everything done that needs to be done, or if we're gonna have to do it in pieces, and 1 year after the other, right? So that you can still have a functioning festival site. So we'll have to look into all that. But within the next 2 years, 3 years, somewhere in that neighborhood, we have to have the trail grant done by, I think it's June of 24. So that's got to tie in, and that's probably one of the last pieces that go in with that. So we'll have to be done pretty close to that.
Are there time constraints on the large grant for Cheetah Lake too?
No,
Okay.
no. So that's just a yearly reporting. At least that's the way we're reading it. We're going to confirm that with Department of Administrative Services before we commit to that. But yeah, that's what it says.
Okay.
On with the amount of potential dollars that are available out there for parks and trees and trails and recreation. Is it easy to get ahead of yourself in terms of the revenue stream that's coming in to keep up with projects?
So what do you mean by that?
Well, if we were to be successful with, say, another huge grant,
Uh-huh.
we're not prepared to apply that to anything. Obviously, you have to submit a project
Yeah.
in order to get it.
Yeah.
But I just don't want us to get too far ahead of ourselves.
No, and that's where I caution too. We have to be able to manage what's in front of us, and there's a lot of what's in front of us right now. So that doesn't mean that we won't go use consultants, do whatever we've got to do. Build Lebanon Trails, they've actually been great in, helping us get through, like some of the paperwork involved with some of the grant reporting and some of that stuff. So that takes a load off of us, of course. So we work together with them on different aspects of all this, and I think we've got a good partnership that we can make work. Yeah.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
There's one thing for the Parks and the Trees Committee I just wanted to mention,
Okay.
since I'll be leaving in December. I have a tree that was given to us by, I think his name was Foudy, who came here and visited. He went to all the Lebanons all throughout the United States, and he gave us a cedar of Lebanon to
Oh,
plant. And I have this tree, and it's starting to get pretty good size. I talked to Jason Williams. They're going to take it and put it over in the shop and grow it to the preferred diameter, I guess,
Okay.
so kids don't knock it over and, crunch it up. But I would like that to be a project.
Sure.
I think that would be kind of a neat thing to have a big ceremony on Arbor Day one of the next couple of years.
absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think that's doable. That's all I've got.
That's it?
Yep,
Okay.
for that one.
All right. And then we got second session, the drainage master plan.
All right. Well, I will start this out and introduce our consulting team that's helped us. But, early 2020, I believe it was, we started working on drainage master plan. It's pretty substantial. Our old one was from 1984, kind of outdated. In my opinion, very clunky and hard to use. It was a little too, I don't want to say technical, but really cryptic and hard to find things. So we actually went through a RFP process and hired David Evans and Associates. They've done lots of modeling for us on our sanitary sewer system and whatnot. And then we started down the path to completely revise and update our storm drainage master plan. And some of the criteria that we used was we want it simple but not understated, and also easy to use, easy for people to use, and have the data that we need, not make it fancy. We wanted a product at the end that we could use, and I think we got that. But I won't get into the details of that. I'll let these guys who are the experts in that do it. And this is Steve Donovan with Donovan Enterprises. And this is Craig Sheehan with David Evans and Associates, and Natalia Raskin, who's on Zoom up there somewhere in the clouds, is also here with David Evans and Associates. And I will turn it over to them, and they can kind of give you an update, and we'll ask questions if you have any. It's not a real exciting subject, but it's a necessary subject. Go
I
ahead,
might
Craig.
beg to differ about how exciting this is. I mean, I get thrilled about these things. Thank you, Ron. I appreciate it. Mr. Mayor, Council, Chief Stevenson, Ms. Schaefer, thank you for having us. Glad to be here with Steve, who helped us out there. You see Donovan Enterprises on our presentation on the financial side. Steve
Can
had
you pull the
a,
mic just a little closer?
yeah, you bet. Thank you.
That's better, thanks.
All right, very good. Thank you. I know Steve had come to do a presentation on some of the funding and financial sides, the rate part of the master plan, which is an important part of the plan, of course, is how you pay for the capital improvements that are identified in this plan. And then Natalia Raskin, who Ron had mentioned, is joining us on via Zoom to be a part of the presentation. Both Steve and Natalia will have a little part in today's presentation. So I'm going to do my best to see if I can advance the slides, and I'm going to point around a couple different places and maybe. Okay, is that where I need to point to advance? Right, technology. Okay, I might need your help on that then. Thank you. Yeah, unless there's a special trick to the pointer. Oh, maybe I'm just not pointing it hard enough, or I need to be. No, it's fine. I'm going to try it again. Oh, there you go. All right. You've got the magic touch. Thank you, Aaron. Thanks for your help. So overview for the presentation really is high level. We're not going to get into the details. The document is almost 300 pages of light reading for your pleasure. We did try to keep it high level though, and easy to read, even though it's lengthy. So today's presentation is really two main topics. So we're going to give a presentation, kind of an overview with a couple key parts, goals and objectives, and then just an overview of the document structure and the key chapters and elements of the structure there. And then really just time for questions at the end and in response. And then I think, part of the presentation and conversation is about adoption and anything that would lead up to that. So that's the cover of the document. Was produced in May. And again, it's a pretty sizable, but we tried to make it easy to read from an electronic structure. There we go. And visibility. So the goals and objectives, and Ron had kind of set the stage for us, and it's been a pleasure working with Ron and Colson and the city and the project. But really, this is intended to be a guide for the capital improvements in the stormwater system here at the city of Lebanon for a 20-year period. There was 5 kind of guiding principles for the document that we had put together. We wanted to analyze the existing structure and the future stormwater system capacity to identify any deficiencies and needed improvements. So that's the first thing, is like, how's the capacity for today and the future and the tremendous growth here at Lebanon. The second thing was to develop a capital improvement plan, and that's what we talked about a little bit before, is identify the projects that can help meet the needs for the city's stormwater system today and in the future, and identify a prioritized list of projects. And we'll talk about that. I think we identified 139 projects, potential projects. We prioritized the top 21 projects that we felt like these are where you get the biggest bang for the buck at the city to meet your needs. The third thing was to analyze the funding mechanisms and utility rates, and that's where Steve and team came in on that part to really help us make sure that we've got the financing set up to effectively pay for these improvements and make it a long-term sustainable operation for the city. So also blending in the capital improvements, but as we talked about, it's one thing to create it, but it's another thing to maintain it, as we talked about trails and parks and open spaces. So that's really important part. The fourth thing there was look at the design standards and make sure that we've got things designed properly and we're going down the right path, looking at the technology, the best management practices and such, to make sure that they align with regulatory requirements. So we'll talk a little bit about that, but a lot of things that drive stormwater is water quality, and there's DEQ and other requirements. We'll talk about total maximum daily discharge. So you gotta have certain water quality before discharging it into open waters. And so wanted to make sure that design standards at the city met those requirements for water quality. And then the last thing was maintenance. Again, we talked about maintenance recommendations to help improve the overall system for the long-term performance. So those were the objectives guiding our master plan. The structure and overview, again, it was, there's about 4 chapters, I think, and there's some sub-chapters here, but really, if you read the document or see it online electronically, it starts with an executive summary and findings with recommendations, and then we give a good framework of the regulatory environmental requirements and development standards that we just talked about. The capacity was the first thing. One of the first goals we talked about is to make sure that there's adequate capacity for today and for the future growth. So there's hydrology and hydraulics. It's a really technical modeling. That's kind of where Italia, our design lead, really helped out on our team with that. We talked about the capital improvement plan, which was a separate document that we provided for the city to, again, lay out the proposed and potential projects and how to pay for that. And that, again, was the part that Steve really helped us out with on the financing. And we identified the projects and prioritized that within the capital improvement plan and provided that funding analysis and implementation strategy there. So that's the overview of the document. I'm going to go through and touch on, with some help from Italia and Steve, on each of those bullet items, except the first one, the executive summary, is found in the document. We'll just touch lightly on the regulatory framework and development standards part of the document. Again, we're not going to go into great detail here. We just kind of wanted to provide some framework for the document and then leave it open for questions. So with that, I'm going to have Italia lean in for a couple of these slides since she and our team spent a lot of good work on this. So I'll turn it over to Italia. They're online to go ahead and share a little bit about this and the next slide.
All right, can everyone hear me okay?
Yep, we hear you great. Thank you.
Great. So the first task was really to look at how this master plan could support the city's existing total maximum daily load criteria permit they have with the DEQ. And this goal of the permit is to really reduce pollutants entering the Willamette River, ultimately. And the way this master plan does that is by recommending construction or post-construction stormwater management techniques as a way to reduce pollution over time. Additionally, the master plan has some projects that will divert water away from the Albany Canal, which the city of Albany uses as its occasional water source. Additionally, this first chapter looked at some design standards. Currently, the size standards are provided in the old master plan, and they're outdated when compared to what DEQ is requiring of communities now. So we recommended that the city adopt the city of Albany's stormwater design standards, as these have been in place for a while and they seem appropriate for the city of Lebanon. So the next chapter was kind of the meat of the analysis. As Craig mentioned, it's the hydraulic and hydraulic analysis. So the first hydraulic analysis looks at really the overland flow of water, how much is to be generated, where it's collected, and really to kind of capture the rain flow. The hydraulic analysis then takes that water and defines how it travels through the city, either through underground pipes or through open ditches. And from that information, we're able to find out how well the system is working, determine if there's areas that aren't performing correctly.
And I think I'll jump in and tell you, I think if I recall from our study, I think it was almost 15%, I think, of the city's system that was inadequate or deficient for the hydrology and hydraulics of the stormwater in the system. Does that ring a bell to you too?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah. All right. Great. Thanks, Italia. So taking that information, some of the background, the regulatory framework and development standards, and then the capacity analysis of the system to look for deficiencies where there's flooding or overtopping of manholes or inadequate pipe sizes. We then moved into the capital improvement plan. And that's the part that identifies the projects that say these are the potential projects to help meet the needs, the existing needs and future stormwater needs based on the preliminary factors that we talked about earlier on. And to do that, to guide us, we looked at where there was, you can see here the elements that guided projects within capital improvement plan was conveyance deficiencies where there wasn't adequate capacity. And then the canal diversion, which Talia just talked about, the Albany Canal, is where there are projects, Albany-Lebanon Canal, where there was projects that diverted stormwater into the canal where we could look to divert stormwater elsewhere to maintain water quality there. There were sanitary sewer disconnection projects where we had combined sewer, stormwater, and sanitary sewer, where there's opportunities to disconnect those two to reduce the impacts to capacity of pipe sizes there. Underground injection controls and dry wells, where they're directing stormwater flow to those wells that would go underground to introduce water that way, where there's opportunities to decommission or change the flows there. There's leading to flooding. Sometimes those older UICs are not, they have inadequate capacity. So we looked at those as potential projects too. And then a couple of things, future development conveyance, and of course with the growth here in Lebanon, we want to make sure that there was future adequate capacity in the pipe systems for stormwater in the future. And then water quality and quantity management, including partnerships with others throughout state agencies and local watershed councils to make sure there was opportunities there. So those were the kind of the guiding principles of our capital improvement plan. And then in summary, putting all that together and looking through the opportunities with the city, we had identified 139 projects that we said, potential projects at the city. So there's a lot that's there for all those reasons that we talked about, canal diversion or inadequate capacity or water quality or partnerships or UIC decommissioning. So we identified 139 of those. Then we took another glance or a lens and created a prioritization matrix where we said, let's identify the most important things for the city, work with Ron and Colson and team to create some criteria, some factors to say, this is what we're going to screen to prioritize these 139 projects. So those are I won't go through them all here, but those are the screening factors. Then, of course, cost and complexity of projects. We talked about the diversion on projects, where there's some that are really low cost that might, score highly, that we can knock those off, low hanging fruit. So you see all the factors that we used in our prioritization matrix to come up with those top 21 projects that we identified. This is a quick list of those. We're not going to go into detail. And this is the map of the city turned on its side. So north is to the left here, just so they can fit on our slide. But for context, you can see the red projects that jump out at you, many of which you can see that are discharging there to the river, to the Santiam, are prioritized capital improvement projects. The table on the right are those 21 projects that we identified as prioritized projects. So you can see, recognize some of the street names and areas that rose to the top as far as prioritization of projects go. The little asterisk next to, I think, 5 of those projects, well, that indicated projects that we said, these are something the city can probably take care of with existing staff and resources in hand. Don't need to go out to get other folks to come in to do the project. They're kind of the low hanging fruit that we said, they're a prioritized project and something that the city likely could maybe take on themselves pending capacity and availability. So the red projects were those prioritized projects. The blue were any future projects that had some, the UIC decommissioning or sanitary sewer type capital projects. And then all the rest, the yellow there that you can see, those are all kind of comprise the remaining of the 139 projects that we identified in the capital improvement the plan there. So you can see all the different types of pipes and projects. There's some open ditches and closed conduit pipes that comprise all of the capital improvement projects. And then the green are just a compilation of the rest of the stormwater system that really are okay as is. And then this isn't saying that everything needs to be done and completed within the 20-year time frame, but this is just an overview of where we found the greatest opportunity for the city. So again, those 21 projects, they range in cost and size. And you can see the scale there. And it might be hard to read this from afar. You might be able to see it on your printouts there. But the range in projects go from about $20,000 to $3 million, those top 21 projects. And you can see the scale and the size of some of those projects and what that would be from a capital projected cost perspective, with a total cost of those top 21 projects of about $10 million. So you can see if you added those all together, that's what the total would be. So that's a rough estimate of the total capital cost on those projects. Now, the question is, how do you pay for that? Or if you were to pay for it, how do you do that? And this is where I'll turn it over to my friend and colleague, Steve, to share a little bit of the funding analysis and implementation strategy.
And for the bad news. July 28th last year, we had a real good work session. Mayor, you might remember, rip the Band-Aid off conversation. Your current rate structure is not predicated on any confirmed unit of demand. Kim, can you hold your big bottle of water up in the air? Can you hold up that bottle in the air? Councilor Nasser, can you hold your can up in the air? Now, large, medium, and small. That's how you charge right now. But we don't have a unit of demand. But in that large container, there's 64 ounces. In that bottle, there's 32 ounces. In that can, there's 12 ounces. Now we have a unit of demand. In stormwater, we use impervious surface, measured impervious surface as a unit of demand. And then we sort of coalesce that around our standard unit of service, which is a single family home. And that's about 2,500 to 3,000 square feet of impervious surface. That becomes the service unit. And then anybody else is measured other than a single family residential customer. And 15 years ago when you started doing this, didn't have the capacity to measure. With technology and with Google Maps and everything else, Ron has a layer in his GIS that can measure properties' impervious surface. So now we've got a linkage of cost of service and service to deliver demand. And like I said, last year, we looked at what's everybody else. I think that, Councilor Nasser, you said in the last presentation, what's the rest of the state think? Well, we did that, and we looked at Salem and Springfield and Eugene and Albany and Corvallis, and they're all on an impervious surface basis. So we want you to consider moving to that basis. Now, what's that going to what's going to mean? Well, for the small residential and the small commercials, it'll have effectively no impact. What's going to happen is the large parcels with real high density of development is paying a very low price now. And they're going to switch because they're now using more units of demand. And you're going to see that from your, like Lowe's, anyone that has a large parking lot and a large roof area. And we talked about some of those cases. We'd like you to consider to do that now while your rates are very low. And your rates are very low relative to everyone else in the area. Rip the Band-Aid off and get to it, so that we can level the playing field, because you just saw $10 million of hurt coming on you over the next 5 years. And you're going to have more operating expenses, and you're a community over 10,000. You're going to have a higher regulatory hurdle to follow. Your costs are going up, and that's going to put.
Switch to that after we had that meeting last year.
No, we're working through that process right
Oh,
now.
okay.
In fact, we have a meeting scheduled, I think, in 2 weeks. We've got the ESU developed, and Casey's getting ready to, Casey and Casey are going to dump that into Springbrook so that we can see the impacts. So yeah, we're moving it forward.
Okay.
We just haven't brought it back to the council yet because we don't really have anything yet that we can show. But obviously there'd be a couple of public hearings and whatnot and some presentations.
It would be good to get on that horse now, because in 5-6 years, when your rates have tripled, quadrupled, depending on how the world works, that bent is only going to get worse. And we'd like to make it happen now. So that's what the first thing that really jumped out at us on the city. I'm going to probably move it on to the end now. I'll shut up and we can just kick it back to Ron and see what you folks think about what we've done here.
Thanks, Steve and Craig and Natalia. So initial response, questions, yeah.
Not because of how I feel about it, just want to put it out there. When you switch to that kind of rating system, how do you feel that affects the incoming economy in terms of how a business looks at where it wants to move and lay its foundation?
That's a great question. And I mean, if I'm a business and I'm going to move to your town, do utility rates make a difference? If I'm a huge water consumer or a large sewer consumer, yeah, it could make a difference. Generally speaking, on stormwater, they're very used to paying these fees, large impervious surface customers, and your rates are dirt cheap now. I know you can't see this. This was from the June or July show last year. A single family home in town right now pays $3.66. In Salem, it's $16. In Springfield, it's $15.80. It's Eugene, it's $16. You know, you're 5 times, 4 times higher or less than these folks. And I've got communities in in other parts of the state and in California, they're paying $30, $40 a month for stormwater. So I don't think that's going to move the needle for them, but it's a great question.
How does it relate to their sizes when you throw these numbers out? I heard larger cities. Let's talk about the ones that are similar in size.
Oh, no, these are, I would say that's why we chose the communities around you
But
rather than saying.
I heard Salem.
Well, yeah, you're a good point. But we figured areas in the valley here would have your similar regulatory requirements, your similar hydrologic and hydrology requirements. And that's where it came from.
I say that because since I've been here, I hear a lot of folks mention water prices. And,
yeah.
and for a lot of reasons that they may or may not know. So I'm asking these questions in public so that we can talk about the differences between the other locations of our size, of our demographics. And I'd like folks to know that we are at the bottom of the.
You are. But I'm not going to lie to you. There are communities that don't charge a stormwater fee at all. If you're below 10,000 in population, Sweet Home, they don't have a fee.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a stormwater fee. There are other communities that don't have them in the valley here. Does that mean that they don't have the cost to serve it? What it means is they're probably they're taking the fees or the cost to operate their stormwater system. They're taking it out of the sewer fees. They're taking it out of another pocket. You folks are fortunate that you're being transparent with your customers. You're telling them, this is the fee and this is the service you're getting. So I think that's helpful. But there are smaller towns out here that don't have any fee at all.
Ron, you're a smart guy. I'm glad you understand all this.
Wow. I don't know about that, but thanks for the.
How okay, so I looked at where we talked about the diverting drainage and the canal diversion. Are those two the same thing? Is that the same thing, canal diversion versus making sure that Albany's getting an opportunity to get cleaner water? Are those the same things?
We currently have multiple points along the canal that storm drainage enters as part of an agreement that we had with Albany back in 16, 15. I don't remember when we, somewhere in that neighborhood. One of the things we agreed to do was look at ways to remove drainage from the canal. And understandably so, they're an MS4 community, so their requirements are multitudes times more than what ours are in terms of environmental regulation. So, and also for flood control, they wanted it out. So that's one of the reasons we're looking at that. How do we take those points? And we may or may not be able to in some cases, but in some cases we can. And if we can do reduction in that and take some of that drainage out of the canal and maybe move it back to the river, say, or a different drainage area.
So by definition, when I ask canal diversion and reducing pollutants are the same thing?
Yeah, basically.
Okay,
So
they are.
yes, they use it as a drinking water source, right? So the less storm drainage from our street system that goes into the canal, probably the better, yes.
How is it possible to make that happen?
Magic.
Yeah, I thought maybe he might be able to answer that.
No, I mean, there's
Is that the same
ways.
magic that gets all the junk out of the canal?
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
shopping carts and signs and
Sure.
everything else?
You just have to look to see if you can make grade, right? So can I make grade to and capture this drainage that's going to the canal now and take it to a different location, treat it, or maybe even we treat it going into the canal, or we do something different as we come to these projects. That's going to be a redevelopment thing as redevelopment occurs, you know? I mean, we're not going to jump out there and start diverting drainage out of the canal right now. We don't, for one, we don't have a rate structure or money in place to do that. I think we're going to be more focused on what's coming and some of these smaller projects where we can actually improve things in our town. And if we come across a project where we can help Albany and get the drainage out of the canal, we'll jump on it. But it, you know, Steve kind of summed it up. We make about a little over $400,000 a year in our drainage utility. By the time you pay for a collection staff person to keep, you know, your system, they work on collections, and you do the routine maintenance, and you're left with very little capital. So there's not a lot can be done at this point. So.
What is routine maintenance for stormwater? Is that making sure they're clear, or actually are you talking about replacing pipes? Is that routine maintenance?
So routine maintenance would be the ditches. So we send our crews out to weed eat ditches, mow ditches. Scott and his crew are constantly televising and cleaning storm pipes. We're cleaning all the catch basins once a year before winter comes around. So that would be routine maintenance. And then as they come along, if they see something that's broken, obviously they're fixing it. We try and do you know, smaller storm projects, you know, where we can fix this piece of pipe here. You know, we've saved over a couple of years and been able to attach it to a project where we need a drainage. So it's just, it's very minimal. I would have to say Scott and his crew does a fantastic job of keeping our system open. They're really good at it. So.
I got two questions. On your list of 21, number 12, it says Second Street. Is that the deconstruction of the water treatment plant? It's on Second Street?
I'd have to see a descriptor on that. I don't have a.
Cedar Drive.
Number 12.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the deconstruction of the water treatment plant. That wouldn't end up on a storm drainage project. So I'm not sure. I don't have a descriptor in front of me of what that one is.
Maybe Italia, I can, you probably have the report and the full description of that number 12 project that Councilor Dykstra is asking about, Second Street listed there for 437. Do you know, Italia, what the details are on that project?
I could look it up.
Yeah. We've got a description of each of these projects, a detailed description of what they each entail. We didn't include that here in this presentation, but we can pull that up here for you while we're.
Second question, you probably saw on the news about the flooding in St. Louis. Are we prepared to handle anything like that?
Yeah, that's.
Could we?
Could we? Well, we have in the past. I guess it depends. Every storm's different, right? It depends on how much rain you've had back to back. It depends on what time of year it is. You can get fall storms that are worse than winter storms because all the catch basins are covered with leaves. If you get a storm event that's 100-year storm event, think back to 96, you know? I think they do that on purpose. Can everybody hear okay now?
Yeah.
You want me to wait? Okay.
12:45.
So yeah, I mean, we look at flood prone areas, but if you get a high rain event, you got a, you know, your 100-year or your 500-year event, we're probably evacuating areas. Absolutely. We would be looking at evacuation, emergency operations center like we did in 96. But your everyday storms, there's going to be pieces that flood. And that's what's so unique about a storm system. It never seems to flood in the same place every time because there could be a little plug over here or, leaves covered this catch basin and it ran over there. I mean, we've got a few areas that do that all the time, but to answer your question, could we ever get flooding like St. Louis? Sure, we could. And what would we do? We would probably evacuate because it's not going to go away soon. So,
Okay.
uh-huh.
So I can't speak to that project 12. So it is it's a project that will alleviate some flooding that was identified by the city. It's to install about 1,000 feet of 24-inch pipe that would then discharge to the Santam River.
Okay.
Okay. What else?
Silly question.
Okay.
Estimate 10 million at current prices to do those. That'll be until next Wednesday.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
If we decide to go to this new system, how much of that 10 million will that raise? Or how much are we going to have to go to outside grants or whatever? Or do we even have an idea at this point?
I don't have the answer on that yet until I plug all of our industrial commercial accounts into, when I say I mean Casey McMillan. I'm not smart enough to do that. He'll get all that and work with Casey Headley over in finance to get it in Springbrook so that we can actually see what impact this has and we can report back to you on that point. But at this point, I would agree with Steve. I've done some quick, this building over here, or this lot over here, or lot X over here, and your smaller commercial and industrial, like under 3/4 of an acre, they're actually less based on the CSU. I think where it starts to make an impact is when you get over an acre.
So you're talking like Walmart and
Yeah.
Exactly.
Lowe's.
I just don't know what that impact's
what
going
that
to
looks
have
like.
yet.
Right.
When we met last year, didn't we kind of talk that it's probably going to be about a wash or?
It's possible. We'll have to see what it does. I wish I had a better.
Some are going to go down, some are going to go
So
up.
yeah, it could be a wash. So to answer your question though, is that going to increase this? No, I wouldn't look for that. Let's say it increased our rate collection by, I don't know, give it 200,000 a year. And you look at those projects and you go, oh, well, we could pick off a few of them, right? And then you start looking at the economy and the pipe prices have escalated just this year by 70%. Yeah, it's going to take a while.
So the
But it's not, we look at it and when we bring this stuff, we like to have a lot of this stuff out in front of you because there's always potential for grant. There's potential to use SDC money on some of this stuff. And if we've got it documented in a plan, then we've got more opportunities are open up to the city to go get additional funds.
Well, yeah, you got to have the project to go for the funds.
But to think that you're going to cover all that with your rate structure, not that you couldn't, but I'm
just wondering how much of that
Yeah.
would be covered versus how much we're going to have to go fishing for.
yeah, and that's a good question that we'll have to look into. If you look back at like any of our master plans, our transportation system, there's a need over here. It's kind of the need want, right? So, I mean, if you're doing everything you should be doing, this is what this is what it's going to take to do it.
Mhm.
But the reality is, you don't also want to run people out of their houses because your utility bills are so high that they can't afford them.
Well, I
So
agree.
there's that. Where does that land?
Where's the fine line
Right.
on that one?
Right.
Yeah.
There is one thing I also wanted to point out, and we didn't talk about it because we're focused on rates, but of those 20 projects, there's a component of those costs that are to serve growth, to serve the future. And we would strongly recommend that when you get this master plan done, you loop back and take a look at your SDCs to correct those because they're also very, very low. And under state law, the cost to serve growth can be recovered through SDCs. Just something that, You know, it's another bucket to get money from that can support capital projects.
We've actually budgeted for a storm drainage SDC update for this year, this fiscal
Look
year.
at that.
Based on this getting implemented, so we're,
Yeah,
Yeah.
isn't he smart?
He is.
somebody told me I should do it, so I,
Smart enough to listen.
yeah, well, I guess.
So can I
So-
interject for just a moment, if that's okay?
Nancy is.
Yeah, I'm here. I just wanted to remind the council that when we did the rate review this year, we did do we did do 3% on the bottom line of the customer's bill, but we did not do a water increase. We put a significant share of the rate, that 3% rate increase, into storm drainage, knowing that this project list was coming forward and this work was coming forward. So I just want to be really clear. I think staff listens very carefully to council thoughts about high utility bills, and certainly our customer thoughts about high utility bills. We get the phone calls every month, and we are trying to balance out what we are doing and the needs that are being driven in a lot of cases by these master plan requirements, these regulatory requirements, with what we can afford to do. And we will look for every grant opportunity we can possibly get. But I would say Councilor Olfers is right. The dollar does not go as far today as it did a year ago. And that's going to create some challenges for us as we go forward in time. So we keep our eye on that ball, and just wanted to make sure y'all remembered that was part of the theory that we went with this year.
Just a point, you had mentioned water rates and how people complain about it. I just saw that Salem raised their water rates this week, and they're at about $100 as like $98 a month average bill.
Yeah.
So, we're not the highest anymore.
No, I've got cities that are paying over $100 a month just for sewer.
Wow.
It's
Send me
expensive.
that list so I never go there.
Oh.
Jeez.
I guess one last thing, the adoption. So we thought about it, bringing a resolution back to this meeting, but the more that I kind of got thinking about it, I'd like to put it out on our website for 30 days and let us receive any public comments, give the public an opportunity to review it. You guys can review it, and then bring back a resolution in September pending any major changes or whatnot. But our goal is to get that out on the website this week, and we'll probably put out a quick press release or something on our website that the storm drainage master plan is available for folks to draft, is available for anybody that wants to review it and submit comments.
Sense when you put that out, tell them why they should do it too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause I know we put this stuff out there a lot.
Uh-huh.
I have no clue on how many people actually read it. I'm betting it's, beyond 6 of us.
Yeah.
But not much. So maybe a blurb in there saying why this is important, why you need to read this, and give us your input.
Sure.
I think that's appropriate to let the public
Yeah.
know.
Absolutely. Would you put the whole thing available?
Yeah, we're going to put it on our website. There'll be a link to it on our website, and then I'll have
How many pages?
300, yeah. A lot of it is some of the background data, the
Yeah.
capacity analysis and things that people will not want to read, but of the meat,
Might
there's
not be bad to
probably
have this on there also.
40 feet,
Just
40 pages.
so people can look at a quick version.
Yeah, we can get both of those on the website and then bring that back to you for recommended approval probably in September.
That works.
Great.
All right, that's all I've got. Thank you, guys. I appreciate your
Thanks,
help.
folks. We appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been great to work with Ron and team. You're right, you've got a good one there, and we appreciate the opportunity, so, yeah.
Appreciate you
Very
guys. too. Thank you.
Yeah, take care.
Thank you.
Okay, before I adjourn the work session, would you like to take a 5-minute break, or want to just power through it?
Let's
Power
plow
through it.
through it. I gotta get back over
Okay.
to the.
Yeah.
I got a
Work
work
center.
party.
We'll adjourn the work session, and we will call to order the meeting, and we'll have the flag salute. Please stand.
Oh, that hurts.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will the clerk call roll, please?
Counselor Reese-Camp,
Present.
Counselor Nassar,
Here.
Counselor Salvage,
Here.
Counselor Steinhebel,
Here, but leaving at 1:30.
Counselor Ulfers,
Here.
Counselor Dykstra.
Here.
Thank you. First up is a consent calendar. Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar for today. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The consent calendar is passed. We have public comments. We have no one from the public here. So we will go to the next thing, which will be the regular session, and that will be the 2023 League of Oregon Cities Legislative Priority Ballot, and that'll be by Nancy Brewer.
Good afternoon, and I'm sorry I'm not there, although you probably aren't. This is something that the league puts out before the big sessions to see what their legislative priorities are from the cities that they serve. There are about 214 cities that are members of the league, and they do ask for votes. This really is a council direction as opposed to staff decision because they are asking about policy priorities. We took an informal poll among the department directors to give you kind of where we would start, because it is a long list of potential priorities to consider. And we get to select 5, but staff gave you 6 as our top. Local housing or local funding to address homelessness, address Measure 110 shortcomings. And if you don't recall, Measure 110 was the one that made small amounts of heroin, meth, other opioids legal. In essence, property tax reform, increasing marijuana taxes, funding for recovery of abandoned recreational vehicles, and infrastructure funding and resilience. Those were the 6 items that we had. There certainly are other items that are on that list that council may wish to prioritize. I'm really looking for what are the 5 you want me to put out as the City of Lebanon's vote. So I'll answer any questions you have.
Looks like staff came up with a pretty good list.
I agree.
Go with that list.
Well, we got to cut one, don't we?
What's that?
Do we have to cut one so it's 5, not 6?
Right.
I have a
Yeah.
question. How big of a problem is it? Maybe Frank can answer with the RVs, RV removal.
You know, case in point, we had one that we were dealing with, and it was nearly impossible to get that.
Okay.
I'll move it closer. Can you hear me now?
Now I
Okay,
can.
so to give an example of what the issues of RVs and camp trailers are is when we come across one and it is one that needs to be removed, it
Right.
is near impossible to get that removed. The cost of it is, I think the last one when we were looking into was going to run the city about $5,000 just to remove that. And the tow companies in themselves are looking for that recovery of the funding that the cost that it takes for them. So I fear that if we do not address this, then we're going to be running into the same problem that we ran into. Luckily, we were able to get that removed. But as time is going on, we're starting to see a lot more of these camp trailers and RVs camped alongside of the road, which we're trying to address to get them removed. However, no one will tow it, and then it's going to cost the city
You
and the
wouldn't be talking
taxpayers.
about 12th Street, would you?
I'm talking about 12th Street Division. There's a couple other areas out there, Grant
So
Street.
it's a bigger problem than most people realize that.
Correct. And,
Okay.
and I don't want it to become more of a bigger problem if we don't address it. So-
Okay.
And I think just following on the storm drain master plan, one of the biggest problems is that because they're not going to the dump station,
Right.
most of these are dumping raw sewage to the storm drain system, which we just talked about the challenges with needing to clean the storm drain, storm water. So that is, I think, a big issue driving this, not just the neighborhood impact, but also the infrastructure impact.
Well, I know they're out there. I just was wondering, how many are we having to get rid of on our dime?
Well, so far, luckily, we haven't ran into that. We've been able to maneuver, and so we haven't had to fit that bill. But the last one, we were basically a phone call away from doing it, and it would have cost
a substantial amount, more than I am comfortable with.
Okay.
And, it's something that if we don't, then it's going to become an issue.
So this is addressing a problem before it becomes a real problem.
I think it's addressing a problem that's there. It's just, it will assist us in addressing it before it becomes even bigger than what it is.
Okay.
My guess on that is that it is a problem in much larger cities where it's only an acute problem in ours.
Right.
Yeah,
But I can see it becoming an.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree.
Easily.
Yeah.
What are the chances that this falls under funding for homeless issues? Is that possible? Or we see homeless?
I can't hear you.
I said, what is the chance that that falls under funding for homelessness as it relates to different categories? Or is that something that doesn't fall into that arena at all?
Not
I think this is for
really.
a specific law, specific rule. The homeless, and this is going to the League of Oregon Cities.
Yeah, I understand.
It's for their legislative priorities.
Mm-hmm.
So if we just say, okay, local funding to address homelessness, and we take out the abandoned vehicles, and that's not going to be addressed by them.
Mm-hmm.
So this is very
So
specific.
there are specific categories. There's no way to make a side note under one.
No, this is a case where you're better off just blatantly putting it out there.
Making 6 versus 5.
Make it its own issue. Because I know that it's not a huge issue for us right now, but like Counselor said, you go to the larger cities and it is rampant and
Sure.
dangerous.
So like I remember, I think it was last year, there was one in I think it was Rice parking lot, and it was burned, down to the tires, and it sat there for like 2 or 3 weeks before it was
Yeah.
removed. And I kept driving a lot. Well, who's supposed to take care of that? Is that is that a similar situation that the city
Go
has
down
to deal
12th
with?
Street, you'll find
Yeah,
some
I
that
know.
look like that and people are still living in
Still
them.
living in them, right?
But the city manager's correct. They are not running over to the dump stations
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
get rid of their stuff.
Mhm.
You drive down the street and with your window down, I guarantee you'll see the effect.
So will we be presenting 6 instead of 5?
The voting process is only going to let me check 5 boxes. So I don't know which one you would like to take off and I'll tell you that looking at the list, there are a lot more than 5 priorities that staff would put out.
I think
And,
I'm on that
and
one.
clearly different staff members have different sets of priorities, right? Jason is more about infrastructure funding, water and wastewater funding. Frank is more about some of the law and order things. So that's really that's why I gave you 6, is because we aren't necessarily in unanimous agreement about what we would put out as the top 5. So, and we recognize that, the league recognizes that. And I would say, given a bill moving on any of the items that are on their priority list, they would work to support that bill, to move it through the process. This is really coming up with a list where the league is wanting to spend their most time and try to get bills dropped for consideration, is going to be surrounding the issues that come into their top 5 priority list.
When we say property tax reform, what are we saying there as a priority?
Near and dear to my heart. I've worked on it for 20 plus years now. So part of it is trying to build in more flexibility in the system, trying to build in more equity in the system. There are some aspects of property tax reform that could be done by the legislature. There are other aspects that would require a constitutional amendment and a referral to voters to vote on that. I think the league at this point is probably going to focus primary efforts on those things that can be done with legislative support. So one of the items being discussed is, for example, a local option levy could be asked for outside of compression. Some desire or discussion about the 3% discount for early payment, taking that away, which would increase everybody's revenue by probably a good 2.5% to 3% a year. Some ability, there's I think a lot of desire to be able to do an increase in a permanent rate. There's a lot of looking at real market value and assessed value and the differences from community to community, and how that calculation comes into play with adding new property that's being developed. So all of those are on the table right now, basically looking for where there can be some legislative support to move one of or more of those concepts forward. It's all a
And
mess.
what would be a summary of the marijuana taxes? What's that implying?
So there are two aspects there. One of them is Measure 110 diverted most of the state marijuana tax revenue that was shared with local governments to this drug rehab process that has not thus far been successful. And so there is either a desire to have the state backfill that revenue loss to local governments using general fund dollars, or to allow local governments to go to voters to increase the local tax from 3% to some other figure. Sometimes talked about as 7, sometimes talked about as 10%. That would help recoup some of the costs that locals are having for largely for law enforcement response to drug use in communities.
So that one kind of piggybacks onto the address Measure 110 shortcomings. Could one solve the other, or do they need to be separate items?
They are, I think, separate items. I think the Measure 110 shortcomings really surround the law enforcement aspect, where you can write a ticket for someone who is caught with now legal amounts of an opioid, heroin, or meth, or something along those lines. They can avoid that ticket if they actually make a phone call to someone seeking, for example, rehab services. I want to say somewhere in the 95% of people who are getting those tickets are not making the phone call ever, but there's also no collection mechanism for the fine. And so I think when there's discussion about fixing that, that's really the law enforcement approach of there's not a stick there that's actually moving people into rehab. If that was the goal of Measure 110, was to move people to rehab, the stick is not doing that. And it's less about money and more about the amount of opioids, heroin, meth, the overdose deaths that are happening in communities across the state.
Yeah, terrible measure. I'm somewhat hopeful that in the future, the voters will get a chance to go back on that, because it is not done what they sold the voters.
Nancy, do you have a recommendation on one of them if we can only click 5 boxes?
Realistically, I would probably drop off the marijuana taxes, though I think it would be helpful. It's not for us a huge revenue hit. And seeing an increase from 3 to 7% or 3 to 10% is not likely to produce a significant amount of additional revenue. I do think that infrastructure funding, clearly you just had storm drainage discussion. That's an issue. We don't have adequate resources for what we need to do for water and sewer pipes in the road. The abandoned RVs, I know are a growing issue in Lebanon. They are a huge issue in communities across the state. The 110 shortcomings, I can't tell you how many times I meet with Frank and he talks about how many times they've had to do Narcan interventions in the previous week to save people from overdoses. And then I think homelessness, we clearly have a challenge in Lebanon in that we don't have a service provider that is operating a shelter that we can refer people to, and that's going to require funding. And it's not something I think that we're going to be able to get locally. I just don't see us being able to afford to do that. So I think those would be my higher priorities. That's my take on it.
I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree too.
So consensus that we'll do the 5 things except marijuana taxes.
Okay.
Sound right?
Yep.
Yes.
Agree.
Thank you
for your
very much.
recommendation too.
Thank you, Nancy. And with that, we need to, let me just double check. We need to make a motion to approve that list of 5 items we just discussed?
I'd so move.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the 5 items for the League of Oregon Cities Legislative Priorities Ballot. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you, Nancy. Items from council?
I'm just going to put the chief again in the hot seat because he's attending. Do you have any updates on the weekend inmate release program? And then also, do you have any hiring updates to share with us?
Been emailing those.
I must have missed the second part. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, it's,
I read your email.
did you? Okay.
Sorry. Well,
no.
for the public.
Yeah, no, the weekend release is, as it stands right now, the second weekend, we've done it and we're at 100% success rate. They're returning. We had 2 the weekend before. Those 2 have served their sentence and so they've been released, but then we added another one. He was released on Thursday night and came back Monday morning, even before he was supposed to. So as it's working out so far, it's working out good. But we still have to, we still have a ways to go and I'm hopeful we'll continue that 100% success rate. So.
Related to that, just out of curiosity, when you release them and then they come back, is that time counted against their sentence still? Or is that just stop and then start?
It's a stop and start, yeah.
Okay,
And
so they don't get
they
credit
get good
for-
days though, and they get some other things.
No
instead
credit
of-
for that.
What's that?
No credit for, okay.
No. But yeah, but we do have the work crew, and so when they come back, they're doing some work crew, so that will go, that adds for their time to get released. So as far as the hiring goes, you guys, I'm excited. I'm starting to see the light here, and we had one I just sworn in yesterday.
I did see that on Facebook.
He came from the Lynn County District Attorney's Office as a victims assistance individual. He's bilingual. And so I'm really excited to get him going. He's brand new, so it's going to take a while to get him up and trained. We had interviews. I'm trying to remember, everything's kind of coming into the same time frame. But out of the interviews, I gave 4 conditional offers out of the interview that I did. None of them are certified. However, they're all local and homegrown and military. They have veterans. They're all vets. So I'm extremely excited about that. So currently I have 5 individuals who are within the background phase. We just did another ORPAT testing this morning and the written portion this afternoon. So I'm going to go back and see where we're standing with that. But I'm very excited. The last interview panel, it did my heart really good to have these individuals come through and be excited and be from Lebanon. They're wanting to serve their community, and that's the type of character that we want for the police department. So
Excellent. Thank you.
thank you.
Will they all participate in the bonus structure?
The bonus?
Yeah.
No, they're not certified. So,
Oh, okay.
but these are the individuals who are coming here not because of the money.
Right.
And again, it's the character. So I have one of them. One of them is going to participate in the donut eating contest. So that's going to be on August 2nd. I will be up there.
Recommendation right there.
Yeah. Do you like donuts? Yep, you're hired. No, I'm just joking. Yeah.
It's a national night out. Go throw a ball and dunk our chief, right?
Yep.
On Tuesday.
Tuesday's National Night Out. So I'll be
Try
in
not
the
to
dunk
win.
tank again, and so I got to beat the fire department again. So
Just a quick update for everybody that don't know, we are running the cooling center over at the church and soup kitchen. First night, we had 29 folks come through. That was on Monday. Last night, we had 40 come through and only had to call the police once. Thank God for Officer Baker. And it just opened about 20 minutes ago. So we've had a lot of outpouring from the community. I've got enough water now to take care of Lebanon. And Lowe's dropped 20 cases of cookies on us today.
Nice.
So they'll be sugared up for you and hydrated.
Cookies from Lowe's.
But
That's
the nice
cool.
thing is we haven't had to call an ambulance for anybody. Last year at the cooling center, we sent 5 people to the hospital with heat exhaustion. This year, we're getting ahead of the game, so we're not having to call for the ambulance. That's kind of nice. Gatorade is a lifesaver.
Sure is.
Good. Anything else?
We just finished the Business Expo yesterday, and the chamber put that on, and I know we didn't anticipate the heat, but it still was fairly decent at Cheeto Lake. And I think we have a First Friday coming up next Friday, right?
Yeah, next Friday.
So
Got a
car
melted-
club.
A melted cake from July home team from that, yeah. Whole top, it slid off.
Yeah. A lot of good things continue to happen even with the heat. So we look forward to Lebanon, growing.
Excellent. Anything else? Nope. All right, public press comments. I don't see anyone here. Next scheduled council meeting, August 10th, 5:30 executive session and 6 regular sessions. So don't forget to be here at 5:30 and we'll have our executive session. And with that, we adjourn.